Oh yeah, YouTube. It's the JTL. I'm here with a box. Hi, you've heard me say many times before how much I think unboxings are stupid, and unboxings are stupid and weird. Stupid and weird. But it's not every day that I get something like this, so I thought I'd take the time to unbox it for you, show you what it's all about. Friends of YouTube, you might not know, but my birthday's coming up. I'm gonna be 43 years old. I spent the better part of this year, YouTube, thinking that I was already 43. And then about a month or two ago, I discovered, through the wonders of math, that I am only 42. The way that I discovered this was interesting. I went to the doctor for a checkup, for a physical, and on top of the sheet that the doctor had, it said 42-year-old male. And I thought, 42-year-old male? That's wrong. That is not correct. I am 43 years old. And then I thought, okay, I was born in October 1971. I started to do some math, YouTube, and lo and behold, I'm 42. But October 25th of this month, I turn 43. And my beautiful, lovely, understanding wife has purchased for me something. And I just brought it in the house, and I thought, hey, this is a perfect chance for me to do an unboxing. So I will unbox. It's awfully heavy, YouTube. Oh, you can probably already see what it is. Look through the styrofoam here. Oh, that's right. Here it is. The Beatles in mono. Glorious mono. So this came out about a month ago, I guess. And I knew that I wanted to get it for my birthday. So I popped down to the local record shop. And there they had it. And my wife and I just had lunch. So we purchased it. So this is the bottom. Yeah. Oh. So it comes with this sleeve. Sleeve on the back, pictures of the records. This is why I think unboxing is stupid. I'm telling you what's inside the box, and then I'm going to show you what's inside the box. Oh God, it's heavy too. If you're thinking about picking this up for yourself, be aware. Oh, a little black something there. Oh, it scrapes off. Good. Okay, so. Oh. Magic silica gel. Do not eat, throw away. A little styrofoam. I wonder, it said the stereo box set had this same deal in it. It's like, okay, so why'd you make the box this big if you had to fill it with this styrofoam pad? I don't know the answer to that. Alright, so this is much like the stereo. There's a book, 100+ pages, I believe, is the book. And then all the records in order. Okay, so these are all the mono records. For those of you who are not familiar with history of the Beatles and their releases, back in the day, there was not really a stereo. There was stereo, but most people in their homes had mono listening apparati, and the mixes for almost all the records that you would have heard from that time period would have initially been in mono, and if there was a stereo mix after the fact, then it would have been done as a secondary sort of specialty thing. So the Beatles themselves sat in on the mixes for the mono recordings, and so these were the only mixes that the Beatles ever officially signed off on. I have a love-hate relationship with the majority of the Beatles stereo mixes. because they are just, to my ears, and I love the Beatles. I mean, they get the credit or the blame for who I am, who I've become, and all that. So I love the Beatles, but in recent years, I mean, listening to the stereo mixes has become really a chore. They're panned all over the place in weird ways that make no sense. And maybe that'll come back around and I'll like it again later. But especially the early albums, I guess really, the first 4 or 5 records, maybe even further than that. I mean, Revolver I like, Sgt. Pepper's, from like Rubber Soul, Revolver on, the panning doesn't get as crazy. The Beatles sort of signed off on these mono mixes. This is what people would have expected. So as you know, I mean, I'm pulling these things out of the record box here immediately. I mean, I've not seen them before, and I gotta tell you, like, this is pretty cool. I mean, it comes in a record sleeve, not shrink wrapped, but in a sleeve with it's got a little bit of adhesive going there. And it's cool because if you see here, it's got the seams folded over the back of the record, not inside, which I can only assume that they did in the interest of historic correctness. Another thing that's really cool about these records that I'm looking forward to listening to and finding out about is, unlike the records that they made for the stereo box set, which I also have, they went back to analog source material and created the acetates for these records, whereas on the stereo box set they took the digital masters from the releases that came out in 2009, the digital remasters. They took those digital masters and did acetate masters for the stereo. So purists were like, well, I mean, it's DAA, not AAA, meaning digital analog as opposed to all analog signal path. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, all of these mono mixes, they went back, they have created them from analog source material. So with the machines that they used in that time, in that era, and so everything should be as close as you could possibly get it to what these records sounded like when they were first released, if not better. But again, like, I don't know I don't know the entire path. So here we have "Please Please Me" featuring "Love Me Do" and 12 other songs. It's cool to see this because, when you think about it, it's like albums at this time were collections of songs. They weren't entities like where everything was supposed to go together and be an entire entity unto itself. It was a collection of songs. Singles were the medium of the day, and albums collected singles. 1963, and I think what's interesting is we're going to see this as it evolves. Here we have "With the Beatles," also from 1963. The Beatles made 2 records a year up until, I believe, Sgt. Pepper's or maybe Revolver, but they made 2 records a year. So here, I mean, in this initial release, you see that we've got, how many Lennon-McCartney songs? We've got 4 on that side A and 4 on side B, and the rest are covers. Here we have an inclusion of 4 Lennon-McCartney and a George Harrison song with 2 covers, and then we have 3 Lennon-McCartney songs and 4 covers. Yeah, this is just fascinating to me. I mean, as somebody who's been in a band, who's done all kinds of stuff like that, I love to see how artists evolve from record to record. So here we have "A Hard Day's Night," again, like in mono, looking really great. All the songs from this record are Lennon-McCartney. Yeah, I just watched this movie again when it was recently re-released, and amazing personalities. I watched it with my kids which I thought was going to be a total disaster. I have one 10-year-old and one 14-year-old, and I thought this is just going to be terrible. They're going to watch 5 minutes, and then they're going to be gone. But they were in it for the long haul for the most part. They were so engaged by these guys, their humor, their charisma, and the music. And I mean, my daughter has told me ever since she was old enough to talk that she hates the Beatles, and I know it's only because she wants to get my goat a little bit, but they were just sort of engaged in the way that I think I was when I was their age. The first time I really remember hearing the Beatles, I was 8, maybe 9 years old, and I was a latchkey kid. I came in after school and would turn on TV, and I got home around 2:30, and at 2:30 on weekdays, WPGH from Pittsburgh, channel 53, would show the old Beatles Saturday morning cartoons, which, you know, if you watch them now as an adult, at least when I watch them now as an adult, they're just horrible. But man, the music just hit me. I was an 8-year-old Kiss fan. This was the mid to late 70s. Kiss was all over the place. I dressed up as Peter Criss for Halloween. The whole deal. I mean, did the makeup. To do the makeup, you blackened a cork, and then rubbed the blackened cork under your eyes. So that's how I did the Peter Criss cat eye makeup. But man, when I first heard the Beatles, it was like, what is that? I was already a singer. I already was learning to play guitar. I already loved music, and I knew I wanted it to be my life. At least that's how I remember it. And then the Beatles just kicked it over the edge. I started saving my $1 a week allowance and buying Beatle records, soaking them into my soul. I mean, quite honestly, I know every one of these records, up, down, left, right, you know, the whole deal. And it was really fascinating to see my kids had that same kind of spark. You know, did they go crazy for it the way I did? No, but I could see what it was that there was magnetic about them. It was there, even for kids 50 years removed. Very cool. Beatles for Sale. This one. See, we're starting to get a little arty. I mean, Hard Day's Night, the cover, with the Beatles, the cover was a little arty. Hard Day's Night, arty, more arty still. Then we get something that's a little bit more moody. We don't get this goofy smiling faces. There's something going on here. We're a couple of years into Beatlemania by this point, and we've got really, we can see their artistry starting to come through in the visual presentation. If you look at the back, no liner notes, no song title listing, just their faces, and much more sort of posed in a way that is trying to evoke something. I mean, they look a little weary, but now we're getting into Help. Now this looks great. This looks fantastic. I loved this movie. When I was in college, we would watch this movie like once or twice a month, to the point where we had a lot of the dialogue memorized. They have to pay me red before they chop me. It's a different religion than ours, I think. Go to the window. Oh man, love this movie. Love this movie. I think it's underappreciated. I mean, even take away the fact that it's the Beatles and just think about it as a comedy. This movie was really funny and really, you know, British humor of the time, just really, really of that moment. And these guys were funny. And the music in this is fantastic. Now we get, we can start to see no Parlophone EMI label. It's the first time that we have that going on. And we start to see something that starts to look stylized in a way that we haven't seen before. And we start to get a feel as we listen to this record. This is the record for me that signifies the shift. I mean, in Help and Hard Day's Night, they had really crystallized their ability to write the pop song, to really nail it down. In Help, they start being a little more introspective, a little bit more relating to themselves a little bit more. But here in Rubber Soul, even in Beatles for Sale, but on this record we start to see the shift, where we've got songs like Drive My Car, but which is another one of those sort of fun, kind of indebted to American pop culture that they had done on early records. But then we've also got Norwegian Wood, which, I mean, is orchestrated and poetic, and it's, I think, the first appearance of George on sitar. I mean, I know we have some sitar on here, but look, I mean, the last song on Help is Dizzy Miss Lizzy. But we've got You Won't See Me Nowhere, Man, Think For Yourself. All of a sudden, we're starting to see the palette of soundscape change. We're starting to see the instrumentation change. We're starting to see the content of the songs change. We're starting to see the tempo of the songs change. We're starting to see something wildly different. And this is the record where you can almost see the fulcrum tilting. Not a single cover on this record, and this is maybe the first record besides Hard Day's Night that doesn't have a cover on it. And I'm not going to go, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm Looking Through You, In My Life. I mean, this definitely shows a group of young adults, not a bunch of hardscrabble kids from a seaport town in England, but some dudes who have seen a little bit of the world and are starting to reflect back on themselves in a really interesting way. Rubber Soul has at times been my favorite Beatles record, but then we have this, Revolver, and I believe this is Klaus Vormann who did this artwork. We've got the Rolling Stones, we've got candid photos of the Beatles, we've got, I mean, this is where we start to see, I think, some of the influence of John's interest in visual arts happening. We've got all kinds of really weird stuff. For many folks, this is where the Beatles ended their early career and their early work and started down the path toward what I think of as their mid-period. Mid-period being Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, and Magical Mystery Tour. And there's not a bad song on this, and it's again so wildly different from song to song. George Harrison with 2 as on side A and 1 on side B, as was the custom. That's why when George got out of the Beatles, he ended up having a huge double album plus worth of stuff, great stuff to put on All Things Must Pass. He only got to put a few songs on each record. And the rest are all Lennon-McCartney. I mean, to go from Taxman, which is such a really cool song, it's got a debt to rhythm and blues and soul a little bit, but then we go straight from that to Eleanor Rigby, which songs on Rubber Soul had different kinds of instrumentation and orchestration, but here we see something that is entirely, not a single one of the Beatles actually plays an instrument on this. And that's the first time we've seen that. And then we go into the kooky dreamscape, I'm Only Sleeping. But then we go into, a syrupy McCartney ballad, Here, There, and Everywhere. And it all somehow fits together, followed up by Yellow Submarine, which is just a kooky song, and to me still kind of a throwaway for Ringo. I'm going to be honest, folks, I don't really like Yellow Submarine as a song, and I'm often tempted to skip it. This record is it's very experimental in a time where it wasn't really a very experimental time. This would have been 1966, I believe. Yeah, 66. Still more pop balladry, more pop songwriting, but also introspective. I mean, Tomorrow Never Knows. I mean, this is the time. When I think about stuff like this, it's when I wish I would have been alive at the time. I could have gone to the record store, pulled this out, put it on the turntable, and started to listen. What would that have been like, to just listen to this record, having no idea what I was going to hear, and to hear the breadth of what they do on this record with virgin ears, as it were. So now we get into, I mean, this is, for many folks, arguably the pinnacle of the Beatles' career, and I don't know how I feel about that. You know, they have stopped touring at this point. In '66, they played their last show at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. I think it was '66. I'm pretty sure it was '66. And then they just went straight into working on something, taking their time, and expanding what they were doing. And so we have here Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is one of the most overly discussed records in the history of rock and roll, so I'm not going to say too much about it, other than it's still an incredibly satisfying listen. But I don't think it really ranks up there in my top 3 or 4 Beatles records. So now we got Magical Mystery Tour, the hidden gem of the Beatles' recorded career. It collects a lot of stuff that were singles, you know, like Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane were an A/B side. But Fool on the Hill, Your Mother Should Know, it's a little darker, it's a little weirder. It's sort of like Sgt. Pepper's pothead brother in a weird way. But I really like this record. It's the one that I don't think people pay enough attention to. And this has the 24-page picture book. And so now we get to what I believe should be the last record in the batch. Yep, the White Album. Now, for me, this is the record that I probably go back to the most. I listen to the most satisfying record. It's also the record that, as you learn more about the Beatles, you know that the wheels are starting to come off for the group. Brian Epstein has died at this point. There's the beginning of infighting. Ringo Starr actually quit the band at one point during the recording of this record. They were recording individually, no longer as a group exclusively. John had his songs, Paul had his songs, George had his songs. Yes, they would play together, but for the most part, I mean, it was the Lennon-McCartney partnership had dissolved to the point where they were working independently. Paul, who was always a good drummer, had played drums on some stuff, and I believe he actually may have overdubbed some of Ringo's drums, which is what led Ringo to quit the band, and they talked him back in. This record, it's sort of, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, it's loose, but it all holds together in a way that, you know, sometimes if you hold on really tightly to something, it all falls apart. And this is the moment for me when the Beatles were about to fray to the point of fracturing beyond repair, but the cohesion was still there enough to the point where they made a pretty magical special record. There's always the argument, can it be a better single album as opposed to a double album? I don't know if that's really a productive conversation, but to me, they play, they have fun, but they also make some heartbreakingly beautiful music in here. We get to see George really start to take off here with songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and the quality of his work will only get better as time goes on. But this is also the last record that they released in mono. Everything beyond this point was stereo. I'm really looking forward to, what else do we have in here? The mono masters. So this is all the 6 sides of mono stuff. So singles and stuff that didn't get released on records, as well as some that did. I never think of that as actually a record. Anyway, YouTube, maybe I'll talk more about the Beatles, individual records in more detail. If you're interested in that, maybe let me know in the comments or drop me an email or something. I'm really excited to get into this. I can't decide if I want to listen to the records that I really like first or if I just want to go chronologically. I've got to figure that out. I'll go chronologically at some point, but maybe not to begin with. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. I hope it was worth your while, and I'll check you later. Goodbye.